the county school board demolished the old industrial school buildings, replacing them with a new large building for Black day students. In 1966, the school board renamed the newly integrated school Jenny Dean Middle School. Today, this modernized building serves as the Jenny Dean Elementary School of Manassas. And there you have the picture of the Jenny Dean Elementary School of Manassas. The remarkable contribution of Jenny Dean was summed up in a quote from Richard C. Hayden, Superintendent of Prince William County Public Schools, when the county school board bought the Manassas Industrial School in 1938. Quote, Jenny Dean had done for Black education in this limited Northern Virginia area what Booker T. Washington had done for the nation in the field of industrial education. That the Virginia Department of Education, upon due investigation, was willing to finance the original setup, entire campus and farm, into the state's educational system through a loan of $20,000 from the Literary Fund to a 3-member county board constitutes another tribute to the wisdom, vision, and constructive service Jenny Dean rendered both to her community and her state. The school is considered by the State Department of Education as a pioneer in the regional high school movement, unquote. A 1913 obituary in Prince William County noted that in the death of Jenny Dean, the world has lost one of its most enthusiastic yet unostentatious benefactors, who never permitted obstacles or personal discomfort to bar her efforts toward the uplift and general welfare of her race. It was the energy and acumen of Jenny Dean and those whom she fired with her own zeal that made the Manassas Industrial School possible. That a colored woman, born in slavery and subject to the vicissitudes of poverty, could have founded churches, Sunday schools, and established an institution for training the youth of her people is the strongest evidence of what may be achieved through sincerity of purpose and good work, inspired by faith even under the most adverse conditions. One who knew her observed, quote, she thought that life is a privilege as well as a responsibility, and that birth or origin have but little bearing on success or failure if the will to help oneself is cultivated and encouraged, unquote. Jenny Dean's accomplishments were supported and most admired by her family, particularly by her sister Ella, her niece Annie B., and her brother-in-law, Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey, founding pastor of Little Zion Baptist Church. It was with some awe that I visited that cemetery in Catharpin, Virginia, and gazed at the tombstones of Jenny Dean and the Bailey family. The most humble tombstone on the right is that for Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey and his wife, Ella. Reverend Bailey died at the age of 94 in 1936. His wife, Ella, died in 1933 at the age of 60 years old. The tombstone inscription simply said, Father, Mother. By reviewing the last will and testament of Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey, I discovered the full name of his wife, Ella Hulda Dean Bailey. Reverend Bailey left to his children some 5.2987 acres in Occoquan, as shown in the 1942 plat then owned by his daughter, Annie Beatrice Bailey Rose. The little that we know of Ella Dean indicates her own remarkable community service in the field of education. According to their daughter, Annie Bailey Rose, her father was 55 when he married her mother, who was then 25 years old. After Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey finished his ministry at Wayland Seminary, he went around building 5 churches. In the process, he met Jenny Dean, founder of the Manassas Industrial School for Colored Youth, as well as her sister, Ella. After their marriage, Ella Dean Bailey started teaching in the elementary schools for colored students. In the words of Annie Bailey Rose, quote, my mother had taught in Loudon. She taught those kids to plait corn shucks. She could cane chairs. She did handwork. She taught sewing. She did not get more than $35 or $40 a month, unquote. Annie Bailey Rose noted that her mother, like her father, attended Wayland Seminary. My research on Annie Beatrice Bailey Rose resulted in more press reports than for her parents. The daughter of Reverend Louis Henry Bailey lived a long and fruitful life, like her father. She died in 1989 at the age of 96. Her tombstone said simply, philanthropist. I noted discrepancies in her birth dates in various reports, but I will respect the date listed in her tomb, 7 January 1893. I have traced her exemplary community service through excerpts of her press interviews over the years. Annie Bailey Rose was born in Catharpin, Virginia, and educated at the Manassas Industrial School, which was founded by her aunt, Jenny Dean. She also attended Howard University before teaching elementary school from 1915 to the early 1920s in Prince William, Fairfax, and Loudoun counties. She then worked for 25 years at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing as a currency inspector until retiring in 1946. Not one to be idle, Annie Bailey Rose then decided to train as a nursing assistant at the old Alexandria Hospital on Duke Street and worked there as a nursing assistant until 1976, when she retired at the age of 83 years old. Annie Bailey Rose also lectured on Black history in the city schools, helped organize people for the 1963 March on Washington, worked at state Democratic conventions, and worked to register Blacks to vote every year since the 1940s. She worked throughout her life transporting and caring for the elderly, who were often younger than she, tutoring Black youths and volunteering at churches. In 1978, the Alexandria Gazette profiled Annie B. Rose as an Alexandrian you can't help loving. She said that, quote, two things stand out in a person's life, and they are love and loving and service. A recipient of the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce George Washington Leadership Medal and the Urban League Award for her humanitarian activities, Mrs. Rose has tried to help others in any way she can. In 1983, the Washington Post reported that a sense of her people's history ceaselessly stirred in Annie Bailey Rose, a daughter of a slave. The walls of her Old Town Alexandria home carried reminders of local Black accomplishments. A plate emblazoned with the image of Little Zion Baptist Church, founded by her father in 1891, an aging photograph of her aunt, Jenny Dean, who founded the Manassas Industrial School for colored youth. Annie B. Rose often stressed that, quote, we have a heritage that we should respect and preserve, unquote. In 1983, Annie B. Rose and members of the Parker Gray Alumni Association and the Alexandria Society for the Preservation of Black Heritage began a Black History Center in Alexandria. The center is located in what was then the tiny city-owned red brick building at 638 North Alfred Street. It was here in the days of racial segregation that the city's colored library was housed. Rose pointed out that Alexandria was a city that in the 19th century served both as a haven for free Blacks and as a major embarkation point for slaves being shipped to the Deep South. In 1983, there was little in the two-room building except an old desk, a bookcase, a vintage Admiral refrigerator, and 3 glass display cases donated by the Kennedy Center. Rose said at that time, quote, I am praying that little building will be a constant source of knowledge to our young Blacks. They just don't know about our history and our contributions to this society, unquote. By 1987, Annie Bailey Rose was giving oral history interviews like the one reported in the Washington Post entitled Remembrances of a Pioneer. The article stated that Annie Bailey Rose, aged 94 in 1987, has been an eyewitness to much of the century's challenges and has remained an important and active participant in her community. At a 1987 banquet, Rose was one of 6 people honored by the National Caucus and Center on Black Aged Inc. She was cited for her work in voter registration drives, housing for the poor, and general services for the elderly. The death of Annie Beatrice Bailey Rose at the age of 96 on April 25, 1989, was reported in several press articles. She was the last to die of the 4 children of Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey, and she left her estate to a nephew who donated many items to the Alexandria Black History Museum that she helped to organize. I was privileged to visit the Alexandria Black History Museum as part of my research, and I would like to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation for the support of Audrey Davis and Louis Hicks in my research. The Washington Post reported that Alexandrians paid tribute to Annie Beatrice Bailey Rose, an Alexandria community activist for more than 40 years. She had lived in Alexandria since 1926. Miss Annie, as many called her, never forgot the lessons she learned from her father, Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey, who was once a slave, about the importance of education, honesty, and hard work. Because of that, she never did anything halfway. Besides having 3 careers as a teacher, currency inspector, and nursing assistant, Annie B. Rose also founded the Alexandria Society for the Preservation of Black Heritage, was the first Black president of the Alexandria Women's Civic Association, was founder of the Alexandria Commission on the Aging, served on the area's Urban League Board, was a church organist for 30 years, and devoted countless hours to helping others. Annie Bailey Rose lived much of her life just a few blocks from the Franklin and Armfield slave pen, where her father was once sold, which still stands on Duke Street in Alexandria. Of all her plaques and honors, one of her most cherished was presented in 1985 when the former slave pen was made a historic landmark to honor the slaves held there. And in 1988, a dedication plaque to the memory of Reverend Lewis Henry Bailey was installed in the Alexandria slave pen, Freedom House. In 1987, the Alexandria City Council honored Annie Bailey Rose. After her death, then Mayor of Alexandria, James P. Moran, called her, quote, a conscience of the community, unquote. He gave a eulogy that began, quote, we never deserved Annie Rose. No city could have. But Alexandria was perhaps the least deserving, for it was this city that sold Annie Bailey Rose's father into slavery, unquote. Alexandria City Manager, Vola Lawson, remembered Annie Bailey Rose as a, quote, gentle, self-effacing woman of deep religious conviction and a bone-deep conviction to social justice, unquote.